Welcome back to Spotlight. It's one of the most devastating ordeals a family can endure, not knowing the fate of a loved one. Sadly, more than 2,500 Australians are classed as long-term missing persons, which means longer than 3 months. In the case of Bronwyn Winfield, it's been 3 long decades. The young mum vanished from northern New South Wales. Now, a true crime podcast has exposed appalling police failings and revealed new evidence which could solve the case. Reporter Sarah Greenhalgh has tracked down the man at the centre of the investigation.
Lennox Head is synonymous with surfing, a haven for those who love the ocean with its right-hand point break, one of Australia's most famous waves. But there is more to this seaside village than its natural beauty. More than 3 decades ago, a woman vanished from here without a trace. Now, is the mystery of what happened to Bronwyn Winfield about to be solved?
We have Bronwyn, John, and then Lauren. A lot of these photos are from my grandparents' house, so they always did family events there and barbecues and Christmas and all the rest of it.
Maddie Walsh is a forensic science graduate and a relative of Bronwyn Winfield's, who's been haunted by the family mystery her entire life.
Bronwyn is here, and then that's my grandmother, Leah. So they're, looking through the photo albums, which is still one thing we do today.
It makes Bronwyn real, doesn't it?
It does. It does, because every time I go there, I'm like, she was here.
What sort of person was your sister, Bronwyn?
Bron was very caring, very lovely-natured, sort of easygoing person, yeah. She's been sorely missed for a long time now.
Bronwyn Winfield disappeared on the 16th of May, 1993. She was 31 years old and adored her 2 young daughters, Crystal, then 10, and Lauren, just 5.
She got to that stage of her life where she had her kids and she was that devoted to them when they were alive. You know, she was very content with the fact that she was a mum of 2 girls, raising them. And she was very close to Dad too. Dad was her rock, you know. Dad was always her first go-to, yeah.
This video of Bronwyn is from a 1986 documentary about their dad, who was critically ill in hospital.
48 hours now at the new liver, Philip's daughter Bronwyn arrives. She detects some movement in Philip's eyes, but her father's condition is worsening.
But all I ever tell him is that he's going to get better and that his heart's still strong, you know, and that he's going to be all right.
Also seen fleetingly in the documentary is Bronwyn's husband, John Winfield. The couple met in Sydney in the mid-80s. Bronwyn already had daughter Crystal from a previous relationship. John and Bronwyn married in 1987 and soon had Lauren. The Winfields then moved north to Lennox Head, into the home that John, a bricklayer, had built, a home John loved.
A very good bricklayer, very anal about keeping everything clean and tidy, tools, house, everything about him. OCD. I said, this one will be worth £1 to you when it's done. He said, I won't be selling this scruffy. There's no way known to man I'll be selling this one.
Debbie Hall and Murray Nolan were the Winfields' next-door neighbours.
The kids all played together. You know, they were to here or up there or here or up there. You know, John was a bit quiet, but, you know, I got on really well with him. Bron was a lovely lady. they were good neighbours, you know, we liked them. They were really, you know, nice, pleasant neighbours, they were good fun. But Bronwyn and John had set up the garage as a little playroom for the kids, basically.
John liked to keep the place pretty neat, and that was probably the reason why they weren't allowed to play in the house very much.
John's behaviour, including his controlling nature, was noticed by many. Scruffy, his former workmate, remembers going to pick John up for work one day.
I went to work and I then took John aside and said, "You're a dickhead. I'm up there waiting to give you a lift and you got a lift with someone else." And he said, "Who told you that I'd gone to Bronwyn? Did you see Bronwyn?" And I said, "Yes." I knocked on the door. And he said, "What was she wearing?" And I said, "She could have been wearing a Hessian bag for all I know," and he saw her face. And I thought, what a strange question to ask someone. What was she wearing? To me, as someone who's very possessive and jealous, insecure, very insecure.
He, you know, like, he controlled everything. The fact she couldn't have friends there, she didn't have her own money. He controlled all the finances, controlled what she did.
After 5 years of marriage, Bronwyn had had enough.
She was unhappy and she really wanted to leave the marriage. She said, I'll never forget this. She said on the phone, "If anything ever happens to me, will you make sure Crystal's looked after?"
In March 1993, Bronwyn and her 2 daughters moved out of the family home into a nearby flat. John changed the locks of the house. Struggling to pay the rent, Bronwyn sought legal advice. A solicitor advised the mum of 2 she had every right to move back in to the family home. So on Friday, the 14th of May 1993, while John was in Sydney on a bricklaying job, Bronwyn hired a locksmith and started moving back in. It was 2 days before she would ultimately vanish.
I said, "I don't think that's a very good idea, Bronwyn. John will blow a fuse if you change the locks and move back into the house, even though legally you're entitled to."
I could see a trailer and a car that I didn't recognise. There was a knock at the door and it was Bronwyn. The first thing I said to her was, "Well, what's John going to do when he finds out you're in the house?" I knew that the situation was not good and that John would not let her have the house.
On Sunday, the 16th of May 1993, after learning his wife had moved back into the house, John flew back north from Sydney and confronted Bronwyn.
She'd actually rung the solicitor from the house on the Sunday night, and he said, "Look, if you feel unsafe or whatever, or you know, bring the police."
From John's recollection, John says that all was fine and Bronwyn led him straight into the house. Then what happened from there? It's all John's recollection. So he says that they had a bit of a talk, that he had a cup of tea, they may have had a bit of dinner. Apparently they discussed sleeping arrangements and he said he was going to sleep on the lounge. And the girls went to bed around 8:30 p.m.
According to John, Bronwyn then announced that she was going away.
She said, "I need a break from the kids. I'll be gone for a few days." And then he was sitting down. He didn't see who picked her up. He didn't see the car. And she just walked out the front door, got in the car, and the car left.
For a bloke who's been described by his exes as possessive and monitoring where they go, not allowing them to go out and see friends, how on earth did he let the mother of his children get into a car and not observe what the car was?
That's the thing, you know. From everything I've heard and everything I've read, there is not a chance that he would have let her leave the house.
Without asking questions or making a scene? Or
That's it.
At the very least, noting down who the person was and what the car was.
Well, that's it.
Had Bronwyn ever mentioned to you in any conversation the fact that she might have needed a break from the kids?
No.
No way.
No.
Those kids were alive. That's the last thing she would have thought of.
And just to clarify, she'd even sought advice on how to keep custody of the kids. You don't do
Correct.
that and then go and leave your kids.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Not at all. And she doted on those kids. Like, they were her everything.
The next day, Monday, 17th of May, at 4:30 in the afternoon, John Winfield turned up unannounced with the two girls at Andy and Michelle's house in Sydney. He'd driven more than 750 kilometres through the night, arriving on what should have been a school day.
I said, what's going on? Where's Bronwyn? Oh, she's left. And I said, what do you mean she's left? It was just like crazy. And he pulls out the petrol receipt out of his wallet and shows me that he'd bought petrol at the Ampol Pied Piper at 11:06 p.m. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, okay, whatever.
Bizarrely, John Winfield kept this petrol receipt in his wallet for the next 5 years. After a few days, with no contact from Bronwyn, Andy and Michelle were frustrated.
I said, John, you need to report Bronwyn missing, or I'm going to Cronulla Police Station right now and I'll report her missing myself. What do you want to do?
11 days after she vanished, John Winfield reported Bronwyn missing to Ballina Police.
What kind of husband doesn't report his wife missing for 11 days?
There's two things that happened that I've especially always kicked myself for. One is not going there originally. I should have just gone straight there to find out. And then the second was not knowing or being informed well enough to know that by letting him report her missing gave him jurisdiction over the case, because it then took 4 long years for me to wrestle with the police to get actually labelled as Bronwyn's next of kin so that I could direct the investigation.
Initial police inquiries into Bronwyn's disappearance in 1993 were, quite frankly, appalling. No witness statements were ever taken. They never did forensics on either the house or the car, and a number of serious red flags were either missed or, worse, deliberately ignored.
It's just pure negligence. It's just...
It's unforgivable.
It is. I just can't comprehend it. I can't.
Up next, the power of the podcast. Journalists doing the work detectives haven't. And what does Bronwyn's husband, John Winfield, have to say all these years on?
What happened to Bronwyn, John? It's been 31 years of silence, John.
"31-year-old Bronwyn Winfield vanished from her Lennox Head home in northern New South Wales on May 16, 1993.
It's a case that has puzzled people for so many years.
The Bronwyn podcast is Hedley Thomas and the Australian's latest investigation.
Families get desperate. Family get offered this type of attention, this type of media coverage to bring something to a fore. I think it's a great thing.
By delving into unsolved cases, this medium has reaped rewards. The 7 networks The Lady Vanishes led to an inquest into the 1997 disappearance of Marion Barter, identifying a person of interest.
Is a notorious conman actually a devious killer?
He could kill! He could kill, yes!
A decade after young mum Amy Wensley's death was written off as a suicide, Seven's The Truth About Amy podcast investigates whether it was actually a murder.
That is it. See, I got told that they didn't find this.
The police didn't find it.
Yeah.
Well, we did.
In less than 2 months, it's had almost 500,000 downloads. And Headley's The Teacher's Pet, about the 1982 disappearance of Lynette Sims, became a global podcast phenomenon.
A number of people who knew more but who had never been to the police, they came forward and wanted to talk to me about things they knew, things that they believed could be helpful in the investigation of Lynn's former husband, Chris Dawson.
I find you guilty. You may sit down.
The podcast ultimately brought down a killer, with Chris Dawson found guilty of Lynn's murder and sentenced to 24 years jail.
This is a milestone in our journey of advocating for Lynn.
There are some troubling coincidental similarities between Lynn's disappearance and Bronwyn's disappearance. The similarities revolve around the idea that these doting mothers with 2 little girls each would just leave to start a new life. The story that was put out by Chris Dawson, Lynn just wanted to go off and have a break of a few days. John Winfield said the same thing about Bronwyn, that she decided she just wanted to have a break for a few days.
And police at the time believed John's story, doing the bare minimum when Bronwyn was eventually reported missing. In 1998, 5 years after Bronwyn disappeared, homicide detective Glenn Taylor was transferred to Ballina Police. He launched the first real investigation.
Glenn Taylor didn't attempt to disguise his disgust at what he perceived to be an appalling early investigation of Bronwyn's disappearance. He couldn't believe that no statements were taken by the former detectives from anybody for the first 5 years of Bronwyn's disappearance. Glenn believed that there was a probable homicide, and that's how he treated it.
So this is John's statement, or the transcript of John's interview with police?
Yes.
And when did this happen?
This happened 5 years after Bronwyn disappeared, so in 1998.
And what do you make of this, Maddie?
He claims selective amnesia. He remembers some things, not others. He refers to the detective that did the investigation, well, lack of investigation in 1993, Detective Diskin, as Graham, which isn't usually normal to refer to a police officer by their first name unless you're mates or it was different in Lennox Head.
Vince Hurley is a former detective superintendent with the New South Wales Police Force. He's now a lecturer in criminology and psychology at Macquarie University.
I don't know any detective I've ever worked with who would let a possible offender or a suspect call you by your first name. It is not professional. It goes to give the impression that they were mates, that it was not a relationship where the police was investigating an independent person.
In 2002, after a 5-day coronial inquest, the Deputy State Coroner found that Bronwyn died on May 16, 1993, and recommended that a known person, John Winfield, be prosecuted over his wife's alleged murder. But the Director of Public Prosecutions refused. In a single-page letter to Bronwyn's brother Andy, he wrote that there wasn't enough evidence.
It says the Director of Public Prosecutions is not satisfied that there is sufficient evidence to lay any charge against Mr. Jonathan Winfield at this time.
What was your reaction when you read that for the first time?
No, we were pretty gutted.
The greatest revelation from the Bronwyn podcast so far was made by a neighbour, Judy Singh, regarding what she saw on May 16, 1993, the night the coroner says Bronwyn died.
And I could see in that car, he had the light on.
Judy Singh is haunted by what she saw. She wishes she had never seen it. She believes she saw Bronwyn's body in the back of the car, being taken somewhere by John. She's very sure that it was John who was driving the car.
It was like a shroud, you know, like a body. I've dealt with a lot of dead bodies in my life as a nurse. I can't be mistaken because the light was on in the car. He looked up, looked up when he saw me.
It's now the second reported sighting of the Winfields' Ford Falcon that fateful night.
At around 20 to 11, I've heard the squeaky brakes of the car roll down the driveway. I heard the car hit the road with the tow ball. And then the car didn't start its engine or turn the lights on, then it rolled all the way down the bottom of the hill.
Shockingly, Judy Singh says she went to the police in 1993 to report what she saw then, and no one took her seriously. Detectives only took a statement this year after she spoke on the podcast. Her sighting contradicts John Winfield's story. He maintains he stopped at Ballina on the way to Sydney, getting that petrol receipt he was so eager to show everyone.
We could never work out what time he actually got to Sydney. We could never figure out why he held on to this receipt for so long. Now it all kind of ties in a little bit. The receipt was obviously an alibi, in a sense.
Judy's revelation of the figure in the car recently led to this search of a lake close to the Winfields' former home.
Bronwyn's brother, Andy Reid, has been suspicious of the lake for quite some time. And after hearing for the first time in an episode of the podcast what Judy described, Andy became very, very confident that Bronwyn might have been tipped into that lake.
It's what a lot of people have thought. A lot of the locals have thought that. Hopefully, if we find her, that's what we're ideally here for, so. Obviously, it'll need the police to do their bit, search it properly. We've started the process, but we'll push on from there and see where it takes us. We can only hope. It'd be fantastic if we finally, we could finally find her and, get some closure.
Lennox Head is a small town and plenty of people here are listening to the Bronwyn podcast. Even in the past couple of days, many have come up to us expressing their own theories about the case and the people involved.
John Winfield has always emphatically denied wrongdoing. John Winfield was represented by a lawyer at the inquest, and John exercised his right to silence, so he didn't answer any questions. I've never talked to him. I've wanted to interview him, but that hasn't been possible.
Hello. Even after a coroner recommended he be prosecuted over his wife's death, John has stayed living here in Lennox Head. I think he looked out and saw who it was and decided not to answer. He also still surfs here, which is where we found him. John, we just wanted to have a quick chat. John, it's a quick chat, mate. What's that? What happened to Bronwyn, John? John, if you just stop and have a quick chat, we can all go. This is the last resort. Did you kill your wife? It's been 31 years of silence, John. Surely it's time for a chat. Surely it's time for Crystal and Lauren to know what happened as well. Are you going to spend all day in the water?
Yeah. All day.
The fact that he didn't even offer an explanation, it's just, yeah.
We all just want to find out what happened. We all just want to see justice for Bronwyn.
We are supposed to trust the police and trust that if we ever go missing, they will look for us.
We just want the truth, whatever that may be.
Do you feel like you're a little bit closer to getting it?
We're damn closer than we've ever been, I can know that much. So we live in hope.